This is a production of Cornell University.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really my honor to be here and speak with you today. And now that we've heard about all of these wonderful veggies and fruits, it's upon us food scientists to bring them to your table and try to preserve that goodness and that freshness. And I'm going to just tell you some of the things that we do in food science to make that happen. Now, food we do take for granted oftentimes, and we do have, as consumers, big expectations when it comes to food. And I tried to list here some of the most important elements that are expected from food. Some we think about, some we don't. Like safety, we take it for granted. We buy it from the store, we think, yes, it's got to be safe. Sometimes it's easier to have it safe than other times, and us food scientists know quite a bit about that and work in that area. So what we do in food science touches on pretty much all of these points here: safety, nutrition, and that wholesomeness of the food that gives us enjoyment too. We're trying to work on that too. And then also when we apply these methods of manufacturing or processing, we're trying to do it in a sustainable, environmentally friendly way, and there are more and more efforts in that area. At Cornell, we do work primarily on fruit and vegetable products and dairy products, but we touch pretty much all food commodities, and I tried to capture them on the slide here. I can't forget this, because we are actually, speaking of enjoyment now, we're working in those areas, and they have become quite popular. Just a few examples here for some of the work that happens in food science. Safety, I mentioned earlier that oftentimes consumers take it for granted, and it should be there. It should be in the foods that you buy in the supermarket or in the local market, but there are things that happen to the food where it can get contaminated with bacteria that can make us sick. So as a program, we're looking at, first of all, how bacteria can get into foods and what are the bacteria that can make us sick, and how can we prevent them from getting into our food. And we've had programs like this very successful for many years. And I just brought this excerpt for you to see that we are getting recognition. We're getting national and international recognition for some of that work. Our dairy team, our dairy microbiologists, and Dean Bohr has helped build that program, have helped over the years both consumers and the industry with achieving safety. But we're here to talk today about what's coming up new, the so-called revolution. I don't know if we can call that exactly a revolution, but certainly we're leading some new ways in which we can keep our food safe. We're working, for instance, on some materials that one can use in manufacturing plants to prevent bacteria from attaching and then from perpetuating this contamination. And you see here a photo of some bacterial cells on a surface that in my group we have developed collaboratively with a group in nanoengineering that doesn't use any chemicals, that just uses the surface features to prevent bacteria from sticking to that surface, so that in the end we mitigate contamination and also use less chemicals to clean the equipment, so it could be in the end a more sustainable way of doing food processing. Something that I'm personally very excited about is what's happening now in food science on our both locations, Ithaca and Geneva. We have seen in recent years an increased interest in these alternative new processing technologies, where we rely less on heat to treat the food to make it safe and last on the shelf. So we do now have a big initiative here at Cornell where we are getting some of these new novel technologies that enable us to keep food safe without the use of heat or using minimal heat. And we do have, for example, this new high-pressure treatment technology that we are using to kill bacteria in certain foods. And we have in Geneva one of the best pieces of equipment that could be at any university, actually. I'm not aware of many places that have that help the industry maintain the safety of foods. And more about that in a little bit. Along the same line, we are getting some other technologies that help us make new foods that are fresher. And these, we hope, will help us restructure the way some foods are being manufactured. We've relied on heat for many decades, for centuries now, to make food, and that's fine. And heat is actually sometimes you can't make a food safe without heat. But we're also looking at some of these novel technologies that will allow us to use different principles to make food. Just one example that I want to show you, because you may not even be aware that you're buying already some of the foods that are made using these technologies. I mentioned high pressure. What do I mean by that? Well, imagine putting a food on the bottom of the ocean. Actually, at the deepest point in the ocean, in the Mariana Trench, you only have about a sixth of the total pressure that we are using now in food manufacturing to treat foods so that bacteria is killed. And it's been successful for a number of products, and these are commercial products that you might have bought and you didn't realize that they were treated with high pressure. That's how we can now buy fresh guacamole from the store, and well, it's processed, but it retains that freshness. And the variety of foods, you see all of these, well, highly expensive right now juices, like $6 bottle of, the sujas or naked juices, or all of these very cool things, your green juices that if you had heat treated them, they certainly wouldn't look like that, they wouldn't taste as fresh, and they were made possible by using these technologies. Unfortunately, Courtney, you can't put strawberries in that high pressure unit and still have them maintain their structure, but in many cases you can do that. Now, what are we doing here? We're actually helping understand better which microorganisms you can kill using this technology, which foods you can make safe and also improve their shelf life using this technology. And we're trying to also help industry to adopt this technology in their own plants. But we're also trying to utilize these new technologies in different ways because you can now use raw products and treat them with high pressure and really use them to manufacture new types of food products. This is just an image of the high pressure treatment unit that we have in Geneva, New York. But what we are doing, for instance, in my program right now, we're understanding more and more what this treatment does to different chemical compounds in foods, for instance, proteins. So there are some structural changes that happen, and you can actually take proteins from milk or take proteins from your pulses and other sources and expose them to pressure. You don't add any ingredients, you don't add any acid, you don't add heat, and yet you can obtain these interesting structures here that you kind of have a jello type product or yogurt type product just by the use of pressure. And we're leading the way in making those things happen. And these are not products that you have on the shelf right now, but we're hoping that will be part of the making of these products in the future. And they will be both interesting products, retain freshness, nutrition, and safe at the same time. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your attention.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.